Of 13 ABC Action News. Now, your table is ready. Join 13 ABC's Jeff Smith with the decision makers of Northwest Ohio and Southeast Michigan. This is the Roundtable.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us here on this first Roundtable of the new month, October. We welcome you here on this Sunday. I like to call it the best pregame show here on 13 ABC because we don't have any others. But I want you to stick around because in our second segment, I have been involved with such a great organization over the last 10 years. And coming up later this week, they have got another ceremony where they honor the doers, the movers and shakers of Sylvania. And we'll have more on the Ray of Hope Awards in our second segment. But first, you see somebody here sitting with me. He needs no introduction, but I will still introduce Fritz Wenzel. Great to have you here from Wenzel Strategies once again. Fritz, we bring you in to talk politics. All of the morning shows have done it so far. But I don't want to ask you about the debate that happened this past week. I know as a political junkie and me as a political junkie, we were front and center watching what transpired on Wednesday evening, late into Wednesday evening, especially for me getting up at 2:30 in the morning. But I want to talk about specifically all the polling that we have reported on the last couple of weeks, that the new polls that have come out over after the debate, and all of the trends that we see. You do this yourself. This is your line of work. How much worth can we put into these polls?
Well, a great deal of worth, but only for a short period of time, because polls really do capture a snapshot of where an electorate is, and it's expired by the next day or the next event. And so you really have to kind of take it in stages. It is good, like looking at a scoreboard at a golf tournament or a football game. You see what the score is, but 2 minutes later the score could change. So they're very valuable. The sampling techniques today are so sophisticated that we can be extraordinarily accurate, but 5 minutes later, the numbers are going to change.
People's phones have been ringing off the hook the last couple of months, especially here in Ohio, the battleground state as it is. Is it still all telephone? Are you guys, pollsters, are they still just using the telephones to get these answers?
Yeah, about 35 years ago, we moved from door-to-door sampling to telephone sampling. It's still the best way to reach the widest group of likely voters. Eventually, one day, there may be another technology that comes along that allows us to do that. But when you start thinking about sampling just online or through email or something, it's difficult because you have certain populations in America that aren't really participating online so much or even with email, particularly older people, and they are a key part of the electorate. Sure. So yeah, everything's done on the telephone. However, things have changed a little bit. Used to be all landlines. Now we poll landlines, cell phones, as well as internet phones. We capture all three in our survey research. So we're able to capture all age groups, all demographic groups.
Over the last couple of weeks, whether it's been a poll about voters here in the state of Ohio and Michigan and Virginia, all of those battleground states, or just national polls on where the presidential race sits, there have been so many reports out there. These are all, take it with a grain of salt, polls. Why is that the case that there's so much scrutiny put under these polls to just not take it for what it's worth?
It's concerning to me, being in the industry, because the credibility of the industry is at stake here. The average voter needs to know a couple of basics about how we sample our political polls. First of all, it's important to know that Democrats are more likely than Republicans to respond to a call for a poll. So your likelihood, if you don't
And that's been proven how?
Well, we've done surveys.
Okay.
Lots and lots of them. Universities come back after the fact and do surveys and then studies of surveys to find out just who is responding to what kind of poll. And that's what they found. Democrats are more available. They're more likely to talk to strangers. So generally speaking, you can expect that your poll is going to include more Democrats than Republicans. Now, to make sure that we mimic as closely as possible the likely voting electorate in a given situation.
You hear that again and again, likely voters.
Yes, but it's important to know that some companies model their likely voting patterns, so what we call a turnout model, based on past elections. Others don't take that into account. And so you've got to find the right polls to follow. The network polls do not weight their polls. That is, they don't adjust the proportion of Democrats to Republicans to independents to follow what the voting pattern has been in the past. Professional pollsters who work inside campaigns, my company, does do that because we have to be able to deliver impeccably accurate data for our clients because they're making campaign decisions.
Right.
Media pollsters tend not to care so much. I'm not saying they're sloppy, they're not, but they don't wait for partisan affiliation, and that, I think, tends to make them a little less reliable.
The names that have come out over the last, people have become increasingly familiar with Rasmussen. They've become familiar with Quinnipiac polls that have been done, mainly because we are continually spouting those out when we refer to them. CNN, you mentioned some of the networks in ORC when they're doing their polling, but you mentioned going back to years past and looking at, you know, how things trickled down as far as the voting population in 2008, how it happened in 2004, 2000, so on. Are all of those lopped together, or you're saying it's kind of a cherry-picking situation where they look and, yeah, we had a lot of Democrats show up and go to the polls in 2008, so we're going to sample just like we did then for 2012. Therein, that skews?
This is a great question. Polling has been said to be part science, part art, and every polling company has its own interpretation. The artistic side of polling is figuring out what your turnout model is going to be. Rasmussen, for instance, uses a combination of 2008 and 2004. But if you think about it, there's been one major political development in America since 2008. That's the rise of the Tea Party. They had a huge effect in the 2010 elections. Now, we don't have experience with the Tea Party in a presidential election, so a lot of companies just ignore it. We don't. At Wenzel Strategies, we have come up with a combination model that includes 2010, 2008, and a smattering of 2004. And it just, we believe, keeps us more accurate.
You don't think it throws things off because it wasn't a general election in 2010?
Well, it was, but it wasn't a presidential
election, excuse me.
But you have to account for the Tea Party somehow. And so we've developed a formula that's proprietary, but we believe that we're capturing the most likely voters for the 2012 election. Every polling company does it a little bit differently, and that's why the numbers are bouncing around a little bit.
Let me ask you a question, and this is kind of a game that people can play if they are political pundits at all or enjoy just the political process. Hopefully a lot of folks out there are enjoying this. I know the ads get tiresome and the robocalls get tiresome. No offense. But when you look at these candidates, and Ohio continues to be visited again and again and again, yet these polls come out and show a 9-10 point spread as far as where the candidates sit. And in fact, in recent weeks, President Obama has had a huge lead, according to the polls, here in Ohio. Why would they keep coming back if it's such a state in the bag, if you will?
Well, it isn't in the bag. Those polls have shown...
Because those polls are misleading?
Well, I think they are. They have a sample of Democrats that's 9 or 10% more than Republicans. And what you know about every presidential election is that the partisans really get behind their candidate. So if you're 9% higher Democrats than Republicans, most Democrats are going to vote for Obama. So you've got that built-in advantage for Obama before you even ask the first question, because you have so many more Democrats in the sample. That's why we weight our sample dead even, because in Ohio it's a dead even race. Now, it's important also to know, though, that going forward, you've got to keep an eye on the developments on the campaign trail. And this is why, as a pollster, if I could go to every news outlet and tell them to do one thing, it would be to include not just the margin of error in their reporting, because you guys put those great graphics on the screen, but if you'd also put percentage of Democrats to Republicans to independents in that little type down with the margin of error, the average viewer could understand just what kind of a poll they're dealing with.
You've also got, and we asked a question on our website, 13abc.com. We asked people, when they look at polls, how that affects their vote. And this was an unscientific poll that we took, but it was just people online logging in saying, by and large, these polls don't affect our vote. However, you keep hearing about the undecided vote out there. And is it the littlest notion of anything that's going to sway the vote one way or the other.
Well, people don't want to admit it, but there's about 15% of the electorate that is either a soft supporter of one candidate or the other, or they are yet undecided. The true undecideds, I think, are down to about 3%. But you've got this...
Nationally or here in Ohio?
Well, both,
okay.
because Ohio is a very close replication of the nation as a whole, and it's the very same situation. Those 12% are those who are going to be swayed by last debate, Wednesday's debate, or the coming Thursday debate, or the whatever.
Yeah.
Events will drive what happens in that 15%, and that's what will drive the presidential election. Polls are part of it because people, frankly, like to back a winner.
Well, when you look at these debates, and does the interest in your line of work, I mean, as far as the debates and polling, does the interest start to wane after that first debate? I mean, there were estimations that some 60 million people were going to be tuned in on Wednesday.
No, it doesn't. In fact, I think it becomes more intense. That was the opening bell for most of the country. They're now just realizing, oh, in about a month we've got to vote. Polls are open in Ohio,
yeah.
and that actually creates a whole nother challenge for pollsters, because you have to capture those who have voted and compare them with those who have not but are likely to vote. So, but the first debate's just the opening bell. This is when people really start to get plugged in.
What do you expect to see happen over the next 5 weeks, for and change, as far as polling is concerned? Because you keep hearing about the candidates getting bumps here and there. The conventions did this, the conventions did that. Now we're into debate season. The vice presidential debate coming up later this week. What do you expect to see happen over the next 5 weeks?
What we're seeing right now after the first debate is a hardening of about 2 to 3% of those soft supporters. They're going one way or the other, but they're hardening in their position. By the time we get to the last debate, about 8-10 days before the election or so, that will be the final event that really solidifies the electorate. We should be down to about 2-3% undecided. All the other support will be
still going into November 6th.
No, into that last debate.
Okay, okay.
And then those people on election day either won't vote or they'll just toss a coin. It's up in the air.
I thank you once again, Fritz. It's so good to have you on here. I get jazzed up always talking about this stuff.
Thanks for the invitation.
You bet, Fritz. Good to see you. Stay right there. We will talk more with our next guest coming up. That's Sylvania Ray of Hope Awards, which comes up later this week. Stick around.